Welcome to the Glucose Never Lies podcast, where science meets real-life experience to empower diabetes management. I'm John Pemberton. I've lived with type 1 diabetes since 2008 and have spent nearly 20 years mastering both the science and art of managing it. Through personal experimentation, published research, and my work as a diabetes specialist dietitian, I've gained deep insights into what truly makes a difference. When my son Jude tested positive for type 1 diabetes antibodies, I realised that all the knowledge in my head was wasted if I couldn't communicate it in a way that was clear, actionable, and easy to come back to. So I built the Glucose Never Lies education programme, a free online resource designed to teach people diabetes management exactly the way I'd want people to understand it if they were looking after my son. After battling a functional motor disorder for many years and recently experiencing a major depressive episode, I was eventually pulled out of that hole by my friends, family, and professionals who helped me get back to being me. That experience taught me the power of giving, and this podcast is my way of giving back. My co-host Louise is a highly experienced diabetes nurse with over 20 years in the field. She brings a wealth of knowledge, and her superpower is making complex diabetes science accessible and practical for everyday life. She is the best diabetes nurse I have ever worked with, and there have been some good ones. Most importantly, she keeps me in check and keeps the podcast on point. So, if you're living with diabetes or supporting someone who is, we want to make things easier, clearer, and importantly, more enjoyable. We hope you enjoy the content. If you do, please share it with those who may like it too. As a disclaimer, the information shared on the Glucose Never Lies podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. While we discuss strategies and insights for diabetes management, this podcast is not a substitute for professional medical advice. Always consult your healthcare team before making any changes to your diabetes plan. That done with, let's get into the content. Welcome to podcast number 12, and this is the fun part. This is part 3 of the CGM series, which is the bells and whistles. What features, alarms, sensor wear, integrations do these things have? So if you jump straight to this because you want the good stuff, I'm going to have to stop you. You need to go back to part 1, which is study design first, to understand which CGM systems have been tested robustly. And then second of all, if you don't understand what 20/20 and 40/40 means, then you definitely need to go to the second one on accuracy and performance. But if you've got your A's and B's in place, we're now in the C's. And what we're going to be talking about is the devices that we have left, which for insulin dosing purposes we can feel confident with: the Accu-Check Smart Guide, Dexcom G6 and 1, Dexcom G7 and 1 Plus, the Eversense, which we'll mention briefly, but only because it has a good level of approval for insulin dosing across Europe and America, although we've got very little actual personal knowledge of that, the Freestyle Libre 2 and 3 Plus, the Medtronic Guardian 4, and the Medtronic Simplera.
So this is like the home straight. So this is, you've done all your really hard homework, and this is the nice bit.
Yeah, where you get to choose on things that would be advantageous to you. So again, here, there'll be certain things that sing to you and certain things that you kind of like, that means nothing to me. And I'll pop in a little bit of personal thing as we go along, what suits me, just kind of add some context. But please don't think that that's important for you, because what's important for me is not important for you. And Lou, maybe you can pretend like you've won enough CGMs in your time to get a feel.
Libre 3, actually, yeah.
To kind of throw in, if you had type 1, what it is that you would be, what would sing to you. And also, I'll talk about a perspective from my kids, Grace and Jude, what would be important for them, because what's important for them will be different from what's important for me.
Absolutely. And the analogy of thinking about it like a smartphone is probably the right analogy.
Yeah. So we're going to cover many things. We're going to go over calibration, we're going to go over alarms, we're going to go over some of the new AI-powered forecasts, sensor wear duration, whether you can have followers, what type of hardware you need for it, what AID systems does it integrate with, and then some of the age restrictions as well. So we'll kind of try and cover those main things. We'll clearly miss some things out, but I don't think we'll miss any of the main things. And if you do, we're sorry. So the first thing to say is the vast majority, in fact, almost every single sensor that's on there that I've just described is now factory calibrated, which is important because previously what you had to do with the previous continuous glucose monitoring systems is you would have to start the sensor and then every 8 hours or every meal you would need to do a finger prick and let you know what the finger prick is so it could calibrate where the continuous glucose monitor was reading to bring it back in line because the algorithm required that. And that poses a real problem because over a 10-day period of sensor wear, 40 tests, you're not going to get 40 good ones. Like, you're just not going to have the patience and the skill level to get 40 really good ones, which means you're going to be chucking some glucose readings in there, either because you've got a crappy meter, or you haven't washed your hands, or you've squeezed the life out of your finger when you're getting the drop. That introducing that level of error, or introducing the risk of the error 40 times is going to be a problem. So pretty much all of those systems are now factory calibrated. The only one at the moment that requires an initial calibration is the Roche Smart Guide system, which requires a calibration after 12 hours, 2 calibrations pretty much within that 2-hour period. So once you've had 12 hours of wear, you've got 2 hours to do 2 calibrations, and then you don't need to do any after that. So there's an initial calibration routine, but once you've done that, it's then good for insulin dosing. Yeah. And I'm told to believe that's going to change in about October's time. So essentially that will become defunct. But if you're going to go on that at the beginning, it's just something to be aware of. So that's good from a factory calibration. But then comes to the big one. For me, anyway, this is the big one. It's probably not a big one for you, but it's a big one for me.
I'd definitely say this is a big one in John's life.
Okay. So,
definitely.
So optional calibration, is it a good or a bad thing? So the first thing to say is, when you're given advice about using a continuous glucose monitor, you're told that they're good to make insulin dose decisions, apart from if you feel different to what the sensor's saying, check your finger prick. Or if you don't have any readings on or are missing an arrow, do a finger prick. So that there, you can't rely on that reading, you need to do it. So there's a likelihood you're going to need to do a finger prick potentially at some point over the month or 2 months or 3 months. So you're going to still have to do it. Now, reality is a lot of people just don't do any finger pricks at all. If that's the case, optional calibration is irrelevant to you because you don't do any and you just trust it till it doesn't matter which system that you use.
Yeah.
But if you're someone who does do occasional finger pricks and understands that if you've got an accurate blood glucose meter, that is going to be slightly more accurate than the continuous glucose monitor because it's measuring glucose directly from the blood, and it's a lot more of a stable situation, then there may be a time or two, and it's usually about sort of 1 to 5 times a month, where the finger prick is considerably out from the sensor. Now, the key thing with this is if you get one test and you see that, you don't rely on that one test. You make sure that you wash your hands, do it properly, and you do it again. And if the two are definitely way out, you average it. And then if you wanted to, and you've got a system that can do, you can optionally calibrate. So let's just take the example. This is quite a common example for me. My sensor pings off at 3.4, and then I know I'm not low. So I then do my finger prick, wash my hands, do it properly again, and it's definitely that I'm 4.2. Now that's an accurate reading. That's within 1.1. Very accurate reading. There's nothing wrong with that, apart from that alarm is going to keep going off because it's thinking I'm 3.4. So if I've got the ability to calibrate up to that 4.2 because I've done it twice and I've averaged it out and it's all good, then it brings the sensor value up to 4.2 and therefore it stops the low alarms.
Would you say that that's one of the most important times that you would want to do it? Is that because you don't want the alarm going off?
Yeah, I mean, that's just for me. The one is typical one is overnight. It's really annoying, or just during the day, and I know I'm not low and I want to stop it low alarming. The other option is that you just know that you're not low and you don't do anything, you leave it off, but then what if you happen to fall lower again? You're kind of like left in that position. Yeah. But this is just me and my personal hang-ups with needing things to be precise. So for other people, that is like not a thing whatsoever. But it's just important to know that if that is something that's important to you, you would need a system that allows you to do that. What I would say is if you're not willing to wash your hands properly, do 2 samples and actually use a blood glucose meter, which is shown to be the most accurate against capillary glucose, and within the show notes we put that there, I would only consider using a Contour Next One or an AccuCheck guide meter, because on independent research, those are the two that are the most closely aligned to capillary glucose with the highest level of accuracy. If you maybe use one that currently is very poor accuracy, you're introducing a problem there. So first of all, you need a very accurate blood glucose meter. You need to wash your hands properly, you need to do the sample twice, and you need to average it out. If you're not prepared to do that, then you're potentially going to introduce more problems by calibrating than not.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things there. So obviously that then we're talking about potentially different meters that don't have dual functionality of testing for ketones. So you're then going to need 2 meters.
Yeah.
So that's another commitment. And then let's say I get a glucose level of 13 and then a glucose level 8 after washing my hands. Really, shouldn't I do another one?
Yeah.
You need the same conditions.
So you want 2 after you've washed your hands. Sorry, probably didn't make that clear. So if you've done, and they change massively when you've washed your hands, do 2 from the washed hands one. Yeah, absolutely. So the reason why it's important to say this is if you take away the message from this, it's important to calibrate your CGM. You got the wrong message. The message is it may happen 1 to 5 times a month that you're going to be out, and you may want to stop a false alarm or get it back on track. If you're prepared to have a very accurate meter, a Contour Next One or an AccuCheck guide meter, for example, and you're prepared to wash your hands and do it properly before you calibrate, you might get the benefit of it. If you're not prepared to do that, you won't get the benefit from it. So you know yourself as to whether that's important for you, but there is definitely a problem where people will just do a one-off finger prick and will calibrate it, and then it messes the sensor up and it's all just a waste of time. So again, it's a bit of a nuanced conversation, but if you're someone who is having problems with false lows, it will be very helpful to calibrate up out of that when you're not low if you're prepared to do those steps. If you're not prepared to do those steps, it doesn't really matter.
Probably quite important for parents of very young children as well.
Yeah.
To keep that in their mind.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And I think
when you're almost responsible for another individual's diabetes.
Yeah, and again, if you're willing to do that and do that, it's an option for you. I think there's probably a thing to say on that is all the other systems would allow you to optionally calibrate. The Freestyle Libre options don't allow you to calibrate, but there's an important caveat there that if you look at all the accuracy tables, the Freestyle Libre 2 and 3 Plus are the highest on the accuracy. So although you can't optionally calibrate, that's arguably the most accurate system when you look at the data. Not much difference between the Dexcom and that. So again, it's a nuanced conversation. If you don't really do your finger prick ever, it's a completely worthless conversation. If you do, and you're currently on the Wild West and sticking any number in and calibrating, that's a really bad idea. If you're prepared to do it properly, it may offer some optional benefits for you for getting out of false alarms. And also if the sensor's running off track a little bit on the higher side, you might just pull it back in line. A typical one for me is I like my timing range at 99%. If I don't feel like I'm a 12, and I do my finger prick and it's definitely a 9.5, I do it twice, I'm calibrating back down.
Absolutely.
I want my timing range. Don't steal me my timing range.
Mr. Competitive.
Yeah, but if you're not a freak like that, then again, it might not be so important. So again, just really important to bear that in mind.
Yeah.
So the second one is thinking about the alerts and the alarms and what additional things have to offer. So pretty much every single CGM has an alarm when you go low, an alarm when you go high. So we're not going to talk about those because those are just standard. Probably the things to discuss are the systems with additional alarms that are quite helpful. Now there are all sensors, or a lot of sensors have rise and fall alerts, which means it doesn't really matter where your glucose level is. If it's going up fast, it goes off, and it doesn't matter where your glucose level is, it drops fast. Pretty pointless alarm because you're going to get pinged for no reason. If you're going from 5 to 9 very quickly, who cares?
Yeah, it's about thinking about, are you going to do anything with that? Isn't it? Is it going to, am I basing a treatment decision on that? And absolutely will get alarm fatigue with things like that.
And that's a really important point of where to set your high alarm. So if you're someone who wants really tight control, then you set your high alarm at 10 if you're prepared to take action at 10. If you're not prepared to take action at 10, don't set it at 10. Only set it where you're prepared to take action. For most people, that might be 14 or 12. If you want really tight control, you might set it at 10. I did go for a spell of setting it at 8, but it just became such a pest that, I was doing nothing but kind of doing walking to bring my glucose level down. I was like, this isn't manageable, but I guess you got to go to those nerdy extremes to pull back from there a little bit. So what are the other alarms off that? So the Dexcom G7 offers, well, the G6 and G7 offer a sort of an urgent low soon, which is 20 minutes before you hit 3.1, or I believe it's about 60 milligrams per deciliter. It will alarm you 20 minutes before. So that is a useful rate of change alarm that's very context driven on when you're going to go low. So you can take a go before then. And then similarly, it's got a delayed first high, which is actually quite nice, because if you've got a high alarm, for example, me set at 10, but you only want that to go off once it's got past that post-meal period of, say, 90 minutes, you could say, I want to delay, the first alarm by 90 minutes. So therefore you don't get pinged for a post-meal high, but you will get pinged if it's been longer than that. So it's a context important.
It's only with G7, isn't it? That.
Yeah. That's only G7, yeah.
Yeah.
So moving on, now coming is artificial intelligence delivered forecasts. So the AccuCheck Smart Guide, the newest player to the market, which is just about to be released, has a few things. So the first, it has a similar kind of 30-minute hypo prediction window, which is not too dissimilar to the Dexcom Urgent Low Soon. So I'm not going to talk too much about that. But again, you can set an alert 30 minutes before you go low, and you can actually customize that level. So rather than it being 3.1, you can put it 3.5, 4, 5, or in milligrams per deciliter, 60, 70, 80, 90, depending on where it's important for you to take action half an hour before. And that's been shown to be very accurate. I think 90% or above prediction rate. So that one's quite useful, but that's not too new. What I think is more interesting, it's got two further forecasts. One is a 2-hour window. So normally with a CGM arrow, it kind of gives you where you're going to be in the next 10, 15, 20 minutes, at a push half an hour, but realistically, probably 15 minutes. So you can think about what's going to be in the future, and then you can make a decision. So am I going to go low, have some glucose tablets, for example? But if you're like me, that means after 15 minutes time, your window's gone, and you're checking again, because it may have gone from a steady arrow to a down arrow, or it may have gone for an up. So this 2-hour forecast gives sort of like what's called a 95% confidence interval, basically a worm where it shows you where it's likely to be. And that worm might be quite fat. So it might go from, well, you could be as low as 5 or as high as 11 in 2 hours time, or it could be a thin worm because things are a lot steadier. And it might be that you're going to be between, let's say, 5 and 8. So you can have a look at that worm over the next 2 hours and think, am I going to fall outside of that? And it's shown again, I think about 95% accuracy that the glucose level will be within that range in the next 2 hours. So again, that could take you from a person who micromanages, like me, to having a 2-hour forecast. And that'd be useful for me, for example, in a meeting. So if at a meeting at the moment, I'm like, I'm okay for the next 15 minutes, and I'll just be checking in again. And my concentration sometimes gets broken up. Whereas if I knew it was good for 2 hours on a 95% accuracy, I can kind of check once, stick it in my pocket, crack on, do the meeting, do whatever, and then in 2 hours time. So I haven't had a go of it yet, but I'm interested to stick it on and see. I think that's going to be the one for me that will be really helpful for me, because it'll just mean my touch points at the moment, I'm checking like every 15, 20, 30 minutes, and I'm happy to do that because it's important to me. But if I could have something that could just take the edge off that for every couple of hours,
and trust it.
And trust it, yeah. The other one's for driving as well. And obviously, if you're driving, you're check before, and you have to check every 2 hours. But obviously, if you're driving in between, like I'll ever say to Danny, just check my level, where I'm at, what I'm doing, and then just deciding what I'm doing. But to know you'd be good for 2 hours on a 95% accuracy could.
Absolutely.
It has the potential to be good. We'll know if it's accurate
as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even for kids, like if you go and play sport, but it's not licensed for kids at the moment. It's only adults 18 and above. And the other one, so that's the 2-hour forecast. And then it has a 7-hour forecast overnight, where basically anywhere between 9 p.m. Is it going to bed on a night out? Yeah. So from 9 p.m. to 2 a.m., you can get a forecast where it will tell you what the likelihood of you going low over the next 7 hours is. Now, the important thing with this is if it's got like a traffic light indicator. If it's in the green, it means that it's telling you you're not going to go low. And it's got an accuracy above 90% of that. So if you're in the green, you can be pretty confident you're not going to go low that night. You can have a good night's sleep. Now, if it comes up in the red, what it's suggesting is you're going to go low on those nights. And what would happen if you have no CGM is, let's say it's 6 times a month that you go low overnight, you'll go low 6 times a month. Now, if you've got a CGM on, which is great, what happens 6 times a month in the middle of the night when you go low? The alarm goes off. You get an elbow from your partner in the head and you're like, your thing's beeping again. Shut it off. So you stay away from the hypos, which is great, but it costs you some night sleep and it's a bit of a pain in the ass. Now, what this 7-hour prediction window overnight does is half of the time is absolutely correct and it stops you from having those low, but half of the time it doesn't predict it correctly. So you're basically halving the number of alarms you'll get overnight. So it's not perfect, but I don't know. I'm quite interested to see on the half. Now, I don't use an AID system, although I love them and I think they're great because for me, I can outperform an AID system. So something like this.
Hell surprise.
But, you know, for most people, it's brilliant. But for me, this could be interesting because the green's fine, but I'd be interested more in the reds. Is kind of what am I going to do when it's saying red? Well, the thing is, I'm probably going to have either some protein that night to stop my glucose level dropping, or some slow-acting carbs. And I think it actually tells you whether you're more likely to go low in the first 3.5 hours, in which case you'd have something a bit more fast-acting, or low in the second half of that 3.5 hours, so you could have something a bit slower-acting. So it's got the potential to be decent. Whether it's any good or not, I'll let you know when I stick it on. But it's accurate, we know, from the robust testing, and it does have these features, and the data that they've published on the accuracy of these predictive alarms looks good. But it's like anything, isn't it? You know, what looks good on paper may or may not turn out to be in real life.
Practice,
we'll kind of see. And now, certainly from a pediatric perspective, I mean, most of our kids are on an AID system, but there are some who don't want to be attached to tech. They may find something like that quite useful. And importantly for me, I was like, is that thing only on a phone? It's like, no, we've got a reader as well, but no one's going to use that. I was like, damn right, I'm going to use it. I don't want to use it on my phone.
It's the arcade.
Well, it's just kind of, I don't want to have to carry my phone with me. And problem is, if I check my phone, then I'm checking
other things,
emails and everything else. You know, I would like to say social media, but I'm a hermit these days. So apart from podcasts, so that'll be interesting from an AI generation perspective. We'll kind of see what that has to offer. Okay, so they're kind of like the alarms and sort of the features, but I think for a lot of people, what they're really interested in is they don't want something bulky and sat on them that's massive and like shouts out, I've got diabetes, look at me. You want something which is fairly, put away. So we've done a bit of a size guide here, and essentially if size is your thing and you want something as small as possible, essentially it's the Freestyle Libre 3. It's absolutely tiny. It's about the size of a penny. The G7 is only a little bit bigger than that, to be fair, the G7 and the One Plus. And then the Dexcom G6 and One Plus is quite a bit bigger with an attachable transmitter as well, which as now most of them have transmitters inbuilt, that's where the future's going. So it's just some considerations. And also, to be fair, for the Freestyle Libre 2 Plus and 3 Plus, it's a 15-day wear compared to the Dexcom, which is a 10-day wear. So, I mean, if you're looking for something that's small and long-lasting, the Freestyle Libre products, if that's your go-to, they're the ones to use for sure. The AccuCheck Smart Guide's 14 days. The Dexcom's obviously 10 days, although in ATTD, we saw the data to suggest that it's going to be 15 days before long, and that looked good.
Definitely a competitor.
I guess on the downside for the G4 and the Simplera from Medtronic, it's 7-day wear. Nice that the Simplera is a transmitter within the sensor, so again, you're not having to put a transmitter on.
Putting the transmitter on charge and those sorts of things.
So basically, if size is your thing and small is what you want and you want long wear, the Freestyle Libre is probably clearly the winner there. But if if that's not something that's majorly important to you, again, you can have a think about that as you move along. I'll put the next one in here is whether it has a receiver or whether it's a phone app only. So pretty much most of them have some form of receiver apart from the Medtronic products. So the Dexcom G6, 1, Dexcom G7, 1 Plus, the Freestyle Libre 3, Freestyle Libre 2 Plus, the Smart Guide, all have a receiver. So if you're kind of a person like me who doesn't want to be tethered to your phone all the time, that can be particularly helpful because you don't have to carry a phone with you. And also we've got quite a few parents of young kids.
Absolutely.
Who don't want to be, once the genie's out of the bottle and the kid's got a phone, we'll only use it for a medical device, honestly. And it's like, next thing.
Open.
So it's just something to consider. We've put that there. And again, you've got a range of options for the devices, but from a Medtronic perspective, they don't have a receiver. So if that's something that's important to you, just important to note. Okay, so connectivity with AID systems. Well, essentially at the moment, the winner hands down is the Dexcom products, whether it's the G6 or the G7. It pretty much connects to all of the options except
Medtronic.
the 780G. The Freestyle Libre 2 is available with the Omnipod 5, and the Freestyle Libre 3 is available with the CAM APS, and I'm led to believe the Freestyle Libre 2 is available with the Tandem in America and maybe in the UK soon. But if you want ultimate flexibility in terms of connectivity with AID systems, you would want the Dexcom G6 or G7. However, if it's a specific AID system that you're interested in, like, for example, the Cambridge system, you've got a wide range of options depending on which sensor type that you like. So there's a bit of a guide in the show notes that will just kind of tell you what's what essentially moving forward. But as certainly from a pediatric perspective, everyone should be entitled in the UK to an AID system. This is a really, really important thing. From an adult perspective, you may or may not be eligible for an AID system, and you may or may not be waiting a long time, so it may not as be a big of a consideration for you. And along those lines, in terms of connected pen devices, probably the Medtronic Simplera is the one for there with their Smart MDI system. If anyone knows Amy Jolly, you'll know she's Mrs. Smart MDI.
Yeah.
If you don't know anything about it, I'll get her on a podcast to do about Smart MDI since she's the ambassador.
The guru.
Yeah. But yeah, essentially you've got the Medtronic Simplera that speaks to the app on the phone, to the pen, and it looks like you can do it to a watch as well. So if you're on MDI and you want a system where you can do your insulin dosing and have everything housed in one, there's been a nice bit of data to suggest that would be a good option. But maybe we'll get Amy on the podcast and really get to talk about it.
She spoke at ATTD, didn't she?
Well, she's a big name in the space now,
Yeah.
So within the show notes, we've kind of covered the main things that we wanted to talk about in terms of bells and whistles and choosing options. But just to kind of summarize, we put a chart for you. If you want the highest accuracy options, you're probably looking at the G7, One Plus, Freestyle Libre 2, Freestyle Libre 3, although all of them are very accurate and more than robust for insulin that making decisions. If you're particularly hypo unaware, the Simplera or G4 might be helpful because it's targeting venous glucose. It's going to say you're lower than you actually are, so you'll get notified earlier. So if you're really worried about lows, maybe that's a good option for you. If you want optional calibrations, the Freestyle Libre is probably not going to be for you, but the other options are all good. If you want advanced alarms in terms of urgent low soon and delayed first high, the G7 is probably your one. If you want the smallest, longest wear, the Freestyle Libre 3 Plus. If you want a standalone, you've got a range of options there. You just can't really use the Medtronic. If you want connectivity with an AID system, probably Dexcom products are the best options. And if you're interested in the kind of AI-driven glucose predictions and forecasts, the new Smart Guide may have something valuable for you in terms of especially the 2-hour forecast and the 7-hour overnight prediction.
Yeah, definitely.
So that is the end of the CGM guide. So if you've stuck with us, you are probably now one of the most educated people on CGM you could know. You know what questions to ask about study design. You understand what 20/20 and 40/40 means. You've got a good idea of why it should be capillary that we're comparing against. And now you've got a range of ideas of various different options from features and functionality that kind of CGMs have to offer you. One thing I would say is if you really want to get super, super nerdy on this topic, you could follow Tim Street on Diabetic Tech. He's been on this for a long time. I want to say 2015. Probably one of the most knowledgeable people that I know. Is a chap with type 1, and he has got extensive knowledge around continuous glucose monitoring accuracy, study design, features. I mean, he knows the products like no one else. He's a very, very knowledgeable source. So I'd encourage you, if you kind of want to go to the next level, his blog, Diabetic Tech, is probably the best place to keep tabs on for what's happening right now. You enjoyed that, Lou?
Yeah. My brain is slightly fried, but all good. All good.
I want to also give a final finish off with a massive thanks to the DSM forum, and a really valuable resource that will be on their website by the end of April will be the study design comparison and accuracy charts, along with the key features for each of the systems and their availability on GP prescription and by the NHS supply chain if you are a UK consumer. So I think the next one that we're going to do is a special under fives podcast where it's some passion of mine.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Got a clinic tomorrow.
Yeah. So we're going to be going through the main challenges, the reason why it's extremely important, what AID technology is bringing, but also why we also need to think about lifestyle and support and managing nutrition and activity. The AID systems alone are not going to be enough. We need to kind of make sure that the people with diabetes who are looking after someone of that age have got the skill level and the knowledge to be able to support them the best. And if you're a healthcare professional, we've got loads of tips and tricks for the different AID systems about how to manage the situation where all of a sudden the glucose level spikes at about 7 p.m. till midnight and then drops like a stone overnight. We've got loads of experience with that, so we're going to share a bit of that.
Yeah, all good.
So we'll see you in the under fives, and we hope you've enjoyed it. Please either leave us some comments or share if you think so, or if you think it's crap, that's fine. Also, just let us know.